also heard from Pep, Ali McCoist and Noel Gallagher, who seem to be completely bewildered as to why anybody thought Gundogan might leave Manchester City to go to Arsenal. Money might be a factor in that, but that remains to be seen. There's no doubt about it, Stuart Pearce, that Gundogan's had a brilliant end to the season, hasn't he?
I think him and Silva are the two arguably standout players, and we can talk around John Stones and one or two others, but they're the two that I think that their positions within the team were probably under threat a little bit. You know, Mahrez playing on the right-hand side and other midfield players. But these two have said to the manager and sent a message out, you can't leave us out. And when he has rotated the odd player, which he hasn't done a great deal, when he has done, he's kept these two in the team, strangely enough.
The irony is that there's question marks over both those players that Stuart's mentioned in terms of their long-term future. We know that Gundogan hasn't yet committed to a new deal. Definite interest from Barcelona. I think from a family perspective, he's got a home in Barcelona. That is an attractive proposition. And Bernardo Silva, he was close to joining Barcelona last summer. Their interest is there again. So too from Paris Saint-Germain. And I was told a few days ago that certainly in the case of Bernardo Silva, he's actively preparing that this could be his last game in a City shirt.
So the Arteta trust the process thing, is that just keep signing Man City players until we win the title? Is that the process?
Well, he wants João Cancelo as well, doesn't he, Mikel Arteta? So he clearly likes to stick with what he knows. But if those two established old heads do move on, it's going to be fascinating to see how City do react in the transfer market. And listen, if Gundogan does go, maybe Stuart's Declan Rice shout is not so fanciful.
Well, I think they'll need a replacement if they do lose a midfield player, or certainly lose both of these, to be quite honest with you. And there's a little bit of me playing devil's advocate with that statement about Declan, because if he does leave West Ham, I would be interested to see what sort of heights he could reach as a player playing under Pep.
I think this is a great point, okay, and that's why, yes, Arsenal are in the Champions League next season, and they could offer more money. And obviously we know that Declan Rice turned down a huge contract. And by the way, he could have been earning that money from signing that contract way back when up to this point. But he's been honest about it all, hasn't he?
He's not money motivated.
Exactly.
That is the impression I have. So it's an irrelevance in regard to the finance, I think, for Declan, which is so refreshing to actually, I believe that. So someone could blow him out the water financially, but I think he'll make a footballing decision.
Yeah, and maybe a life decision as well. Maybe staying in London might be an issue for him. Who knows? But I think it will be very interesting if Manchester City did come in for him. I think his eyes might light up and he might think, yeah, I fancy myself a bit of that. And a deal could be done. And I'm a bit... it will be too harsh for me to say I'm underwhelmed by the potential of a move for Declan Rice to Arsenal. I think he does deserve a bigger stage, if you like. You might say Champions League, what bigger stage do you get? And of course he's an England regular.
They're not going to win the Champions League,
exactly
though, are
my point. Are they going to win the title? Possibly. If Man City have an off year, are they going to win the Champions League? We think it's highly unlikely. So for me it's a little bit puzzling, this idea of Declan moving from West Ham to Arsenal. A little bit puzzling. If Arsenal are the only suitors, and as we believe David Sullivan told us this morning on talkSPORT, he is keen to move on and get himself a challenge, then that will be the move that he makes. But he seems made for Man City, doesn't he?
Yeah, I'll tell you what might come into the conundrum as well. Manchester City, potentially, if I'm looking at it with my sort of managerial type, juggling players head on, Manchester City can send Calvin Phillips if he wanted to go down there. Players are more important to West Ham than the money. Once you get, I don't know what Declan will be, 70, 80, 90 million, whatever it is. Once you've got that sort of money, you pick the phone up to someone else, the price goes up 10, 20 million, irrelevant to the player you're asking about. They're better off, and I think West Ham would be far better off if Declan goes, going to a club where players can come in the opposite direction.
They're tough deals to do, though, aren't they? How often do you get those sort of part exchange deals? It's very rare. They're
not easy, but if it's Man United and it's Maguire, who could be surplus to requirements, if it's McTominay, if you like, maybe Wan-Bissaka, one or two players that are surplus to requirements potentially. I don't see anyone at Arsenal making the journey across London to West Ham as a player swap. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I don't see enough players there that you readily grab from West Ham.
Smith Rowe, maybe?
Maybe, but I don't think he'd have the similar impact to to the likes of potentially Maguire might coming through the door.
And you're our transfer god, of course. Kovacic has been linked with Manchester City, and there must be others that they've been linked with in terms of potential midfield replacements if Gundogan and Silva do go.
Not many, to be honest. Apart from Kovacic, it's been pretty quiet. And it's interesting you talk about Calvin Phillips. I wrote this in my notebook a few weeks ago now. Calvin Phillips wants to stay at Manchester City. And from what I understand it, Pep Guardiola wants him to stay at Manchester City and maybe be that Jack Grealish who in the second season suddenly the penny drops and he finds himself in the team. It's difficult to envisage that at this moment in time. But at the moment I would expect Calvin Phillips to stay. I do think Declan Rice has his heart set on a move to Arsenal. I understand your point from a Manchester City perspective, but apart from Kovacic, and I think that will get done, it's been quite quiet in terms of Man City and what they're planning to do.
I think your point's a good one about Calvin Phillips, but the alarming thing for me, if I was a Calvin, or certainly looking at it from the outside, the alarming lack of starts that he's had, and it's been an alarming amount. That is when he's had opportunities to put him in, bring him off the bench, all of those type of things. It's been so minimal, it's incredible. And if you didn't know better from the outside, you would say don't fancy him whatsoever. And I hope I'm wrong for Calvin's sake, because I really like him as a player, and I think if he does well, it's going to be beneficial to the national manager as well.
I think that you might have a point with the swap thing. City can get these deals done. Wasn't Diaz a swap? Part exchange. Otamendi went the other way, I think.
They're very rare, though.
Yeah,
City
got that done.
Yeah,
so they have got a history of.
We might see one at Chelsea as well with Moises Caicedo and Levi Colwill. I know Brighton are really pushing for that.
Caicedo to Chelsea is a real thing, then.
Yeah.
Okay. How real?
Very real.
Very real. Okay. Wasn't he going to Arsenal as well?
Well, he wanted to, didn't he? But yeah, Chelsea, I think, his most likely destination.